Welcome to the Bookers Alliance podcast, where we hold the pencil and the pencil is power. Coming at you right now is your host, Marky Mark, along with the man, the myth, the legend, Frank Donaldson. Join us as we discuss the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling. So hang on tight, you jabronis, and enjoy the ride. All right, welcome in, everybody. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Bookers Alliance podcast. Today's topic, we are going to talk about the most match-used weapons, and what better person to talk about this today than our guest, the innovator of violence, Mr. Tommy Dreamer. Come on in, Tommy.
Who?
Tommy.
He didn't call us back.
Tommy didn't call back.
No, he didn't call. He didn't respond to emails, text. He didn't call him back.
I thought for sure we had him.
No.
What about Mick? Did we get Mick at least? Mick Foley. Did we get him?
Mick, Rocky's trainer? Mick?
No, not Cut Me Mick.
No.
Not, Mick Foley.
No, man.
No,
he didn't call. We don't have a budget for that.
Correct. Did we get Crash Holly?
Crash
Holly.
He's still with us. We can't tap into the beyond.
Yeah, come on.
So we got Marky Mark and Frank Donaldson and Miller Lite. That's who we got talking with us today.
I don't know about you, but I ain't ever been in a hardcore match.
I mean, I've watched some hardcore stuff, but that used to come on at Showtime late at night when I was a young boy. Cinemax.
Yeah, that's when you watched it in between the blurred lines.
Yeah. So that's why I thought it was hardcore, because that was probably the softest core ever. But when it's all squiggly and all that, you don't know if it's a nipple or an elbow.
We got way off topic real quick. Let's bring this back.
Well, you said hardcore. I mean, hey, I didn't know where we were going.
All right, so if we didn't get Tommy, we didn't get Mick, we didn't get Crash, we just gonna have to make the best of it, and we're gonna talk about the most match-used weapons that we've seen in some of our favorite matches. And you can't start off talking about weapons in a match without talking about the steel chair.
No, I remember back as far as when they used to use the wooden chairs, but I mean, yeah, the steel chair is that's a staple of wrestling nowadays. I mean, whenever there's a weapon involved, the first thing you're anticipating is to see the chair come out. Right. The other stuff, the other craziness that all happened, wrestling's kind of went away from it. The steel chair has been a staple for as long as I can remember.
And whether it's from under the ring, whether it's from ringside itself, whether it's from in the crowd, you always see one pop up somewhere.
Oh yeah, they're under the ring, next to the ring. I mean, people are sitting in them magically. They're sitting in them. There's always one there, or sometimes there's 100 there, where you see 100 of them get thrown in the ring and they don't even use one. But
I often wondered how they expected. Were they expecting some flash mob to show up on the ringside?
I guess
100 chairs for.
Maybe that's for the talent meetings. When they have the big talent meeting.
Maybe
after they get done with the meeting, they say, "Now fold your chair,
throw them under the ring.
Yeah, fold your chair and toss it under the ring."
Yeah, so the steel chair, it's been used quite a bit. It's also been kind of innovated, whether it is just handheld use or put in the corner, or Edge and Christian kind of perfected it with the concerto.
Concerto, yeah.
And then you see them, snapping off the bars and using it in submission holds.
Yeah. There's a lot of variety to using a steel chair. I mean, you've seen people sandwiched in between them. You've seen them propped up and people sat in them. You've seen them used to break ankles. I mean, you
Pillmanize somebody.
Yeah, you break necks with steel chairs. That's probably why it's the most popular weapon of all, because there's so many different uses for it. I mean, how many uses are there for a ladder? Like, right. There's only so many things you can split a head open with a ladder.
We've seen that, Mr. Finn Balor.
Yeah, or you can, wrap it around. But there's only so much you can do with a ladder, a kendo stick, some of our other favorite weapons. But the steel chair, I mean, we've seen that used in so many different ways. Yeah, that's got to be number one.
Yeah. So move on here to our next one on the list, the table.
The table. Devon,
get the
tables. I mean, when did the table even become like a weapon?
So I think the table was popularized in the ECW, whether it was a table that was set on fire, or whether it was 4 or 5 tables stacked on top of each other where New Jack went through them all.
New Jack.
Yeah.
There's a weapon used in wrestling. My God.
So I think the table became popularized in ECW. Rob Van Dam was a frequent user of the table, especially doing Rolling Thunders through the tables. I mean, he did all kinds of crap.
Good use of that.
5-star frog splashes and
There you
all
go.
kinds of stuff. But yeah, the Dudleys are the most synonymous with the tables. That used to be their stick, still is their stick. Anything they do. As a matter of fact, any hardcore match you see happen on TV these days, the crowd is just chanting for the table. They applaud it when somebody drags out the table.
Yeah, they you know it's coming. I mean, you expect it, you want it. You don't want it when you lay somebody on the table and it starts cracking. Then you're like, uh-oh, we might have went the wrong way on
Yeah,
this
that one was
yeah,
gimmicked too much there.
A little bit. But I remember the WrestleMania I went to. That's the one where Edge put Mick Foley through a flaming table that Lita had set off. I mean, and I was in the first section, not on the floor, but the very first section behind it. So I was pretty close. And I remember when that table lit up, I mean, you could smell the lighter fluid in there. I mean, it smelled like a good old-fashioned barbecue in there. And then all of a sudden you realize this is people that you're smelling burning in here.
Yep.
All of a sudden the appeal was kind of lost on me, but I mean, the visual was amazing. So.
Yeah, so speaking of the grotesque nature and the appeal of it all, Cody Rhodes, Brandy tried to kill him with a flaming table.
Yeah, I don't know what he had did the day before. I don't know if he had maybe he told her he had dodged the WWE call or something and she was upset about it or whatever it was. Yeah, I don't know what was going on in that, but the look, I remember the sight of that wasn't appealing. That was scary.
Well, I'm talking about appealing as in his skin peeled off his back.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Everything peeled off that day.
That boy's back bubbled faster than you can chew chewing
gum. A piece of his soul peeled off that day because, I mean, yeah, he hit that table and rolled in it. I mean, he couldn't get out of it right away. And, ooh.
Yeah, that was nasty.
Yeah.
Let's hope we don't ever see that grotesque.
Yeah, I don't think WWE's letting that happen.
No, I don't think so.
So that's a goner.
Yep. Moving on to the next weapon that was popularized in the WWE, as a matter of fact, the ladder match.
The ladder match. Tables, ladders, and chairs.
Tables, ladders, and chairs.
Funny how they come up that way, but yeah.
Yeah, but the first ladder match that everybody always remembers was Shawn and Razor.
Yep.
That was the
first
ladder
popularized
match.
one now. Yep. So from what a historical point of view, I remember Bret Hart actually introduced the ladder match to WWE because he had done them in Stampede Wrestling up in Calgary out there. So I remember he introduced it. Apparently, by his stories, he had a couple with Shawn before the one at WrestleMania, but I mean, they weren't on TV. They were just kind of trial runs and things like that. But yeah, whenever you think of the ladder match, I mean, the first match that's going to come into your head is that Razor and Shawn at WrestleMania 10. Because it was so brand new and the match was just so amazing. It was like, again, as I started off this particular show with how much can you really do with a ladder? I mean, those guys found the most creative ways to do for, what was that, 25, almost 30 years ago?
Yep.
I mean, they came up with some uber creative ways of using a ladder 30 years ago. That's hard to top now.
Yeah, so when the most recent anniversary of that kind of came to pass, WWE put out a YouTube video of Shawn and Razor or Scott Hall. They were kind of watching that match back. And one of the statements that was made was, can you believe we pulled that off and we only had one ladder?
Yeah. I mean, nowadays in a match, I mean, there's 40 ladders out there.
It wasn't the fact that there wasn't any more ladders to put out there. That was the only one they had.
Yeah, had that
ladder broke,
yeah, that
match would have been over.
Absolutely. I mean, because they wouldn't have had enough sense to do the Will Hobbs thing where 500 referees would get down there and huddle up under it, and make a little teepee down there of themselves to build the ladder up. They had one ref out there. They wouldn't have been able to do that. Had that ladder broke, that match would have gone. It wouldn't be talked about as one of the best. But that would have been in WrestleCrap 101. That would have been some of the worst mess we've ever seen at a WrestleMania.
Yep, and
they lucked out. They made magic out of that.
And talking about making magic, you cannot look at these three weapons and talk about the tables, ladders, chairs match between Edge, Christian, Dudley Boys, Hardy Boys.
No, absolutely.
That those three tag teams made magic with those three weapons.
Yeah, I mean, they were able to do it twice, which is astounding. They did it once at WrestleMania, then they came back and did the match again, and they were able to make it more creative. They built off of what they had made, the magic they had made at WrestleMania, but I mean, that WrestleMania match still, it's always, even though, no matter how many times they did it, that WrestleMania match is always going to be the one that's most talked about because, again, they stole the show. At a WrestleMania, that's, kind of your goal. If you're not going to main event, the only other option you got is, hey, I got to go out there and try and steal the show. Otherwise, you were just a guy that just happened to be there when blah, blah, blah happened.
Yep.
But those guys were able to take a whole lot of shine off of Stone Cold and The Rock and Triple H and Kurt Angle and a lot of other heavy hitters being, mid-card guys, basically. They were mid-card tag teams that were able to go out there and make magic and, etch their names in stone in WrestleMania history.
And the two iconic moments out of those table, ladders, chair match both involved Jeff Hardy. Him taking the spear, swinging from the belts.
Oh, yeah.
And then him doing the swanton off of a 25-foot tall ladder at ringside.
Went through Bubba, if I remember right. I just remember seeing his body as the ladder cracked in half, and, them two guys were just laying down there, and you're looking at him like, and JR with his famous call, oh my God, he's dead. And you're looking at him like, yep, maybe.
He might be dead.
And that was one time, a lot of times, Stone Cold would hit a stutter and he's dead. No, he's not dead, JR. He'll be okay. But when those guys crashed through them ladders and you started seeing some of them falls and JR said, oh my God, he's dead. You're like, maybe. Hope not, but could be.
Yeah, and the lure of those matches go, as they walk back through the curtain at the end of the match, they were told, man, that was phenomenal. Don't ever do that again.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Because, I mean, again, when you're sitting back there watching, you don't know. You know they're hurt because, I mean, that's obvious. But you're like, to what extent are they hurt?
Yeah.
Are they, when they're not going to be on Raw tomorrow night, hurt? Or are they, your career just ended hurt? It's like, yeah, it made for a great visual. You did great for WrestleMania. Please never do that again.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move on to our next weapon of choice, which is the kendo stick, popularized by the guest that could not be here with us today, I guess, Tommy Dreamer. Yeah, unfortunately, but Tommy,
I think he's recording Busted Open right now. I mean, he's got other obligations. I understand.
Yeah, Tommy, we're thinking about you though. But the kendo stick, Tommy popularized the kendo stick. Sandman popularized the kendo stick, but he was called a Singapore cane.
There you go, the Singapore cane.
But one thing that I do remember about ECW vividly was the use of kendo sticks. And matter of fact, Tommy Dreamer getting hit and then standing up going, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Now that's a memorable ECW. Notice how with all these weapons matches, now the TLC match, that was a WWE thing. But do you notice how independently all these weapons kind of harken back to ECW days? I mean, ECW they introduced a brand new form of wrestling that, people weren't aware of, but it was, it was more realistic. If you get in a bar fight, you're not just bar fighting out there in your underwear, grappling around with it. You're picking up whatever's available. And I mean, you're swinging it. So ECW kind of brought that, that feeling into the wrestling ring. Like, hey, this ain't just a wrestling. This is a bar fight. This is a fight. We're out here fighting to see who's the best. So, they introduced that. And, of course, everybody stole it, ran away with it, as everybody does. But, I mean, hey, you got to give ECW credit, especially if you're going to talk about weapons, you got to give ECW a special shout out.
Very true.
So much of what we get now and what we got over the last 25 years came through a little promotion out in Philadelphia that not everybody had heard of.
Yep. And you really couldn't get except for 2 a.m. around here.
Yeah. So I was still in Chicago then. I remember it came on it was like 11:30 at night on TNN or something like that.
Yeah.
Show channels that you weren't watching, but you're like, I got to stay up to watch this, and the production level was poor, but I mean, hey, the stars that they created, things like that. got to give them their props on that at a weapons conversation.
Absolutely. And going into our last weapon, it's actually I guess you would say, a combination of weapons. We're just talking about the ringside set itself, whether it's the announce table, the barricade, the Spanish announce table, the steel steps. It just seems that, posts. The ring post.
Yeah, the set itself is definitely, it's probably the best used weapon because those are the things that you don't get disqualified for because you're not introducing them into the match. You're just kind of using your environment. So, again, kind of that same thing, barroom brawl type feel and things like that. That's what you would do, and you're going to use your environment. That's just what the wrestling ring provides. Even as far as like a steel cage match or Hell in the Cell, things like that, it's still part of the set, I guess you want to call it. So introducing it into the match is just necessary, but, it makes for a lot of different angles that you can pull. Ramming a set of steel steps into a guy's head or, putting him through the Spanish announce table. And it's a fun spot, for that. But just because it's out there, it's like, hey, in the real world, quote unquote, the real world, you'd be using your environment to your advantage. So, hey, you got to do it in this ring, in this environment too.
Yeah, and I would go as far as to say the steel steps may be the most unpredictable weapon that's out there around ringside, just because it's heavy as hell. They're awkward.
Yeah.
And when those guys pick them up, there's some guys that like Brock Lesnar, he picks them up and it's like throwing a Lego across the ring.
Yeah, you can pick them up and sling them.
Yeah. And then you see some guys, they struggle, but they get there. But then at the same time, how many times have you seen these, like, even if they're going into the ring post, sometimes it ain't ballet. You get really cracked with those things.
Yeah, I always remember back, so historians out there remember with me, Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. Hogan threw Andre into the ring post, and Andre put that big old paw up on the ring post there and then just kind of slightly pressed his head up against his hand. No way he hit that ring post there, but hey, Andre was a smart guy. Andre said, hey, I'm not leaving tonight here with a concussion. I already got a lot of problems going on. But then there's guys like Brock Lesnar. When he takes that pole shot, he doesn't even put his hands up. He leads with his head like a rhino. He puts his head out there like a rhino and just goes dead head first into it.
I'm convinced.
Figures out whatever happens.
I'm convinced that dude was a mastodon in a previous life.
Oh, yeah. But we've said it before. I'll say it again. If the aliens ever invade, if Independence Day ever happens, we send him out there first.
He's our alpha.
Lashley goes out there with him, a couple other guys. Bronson Reed after here recently what we've seen. Otis. We sent a bunch of them guys up there. We'll see if they can fend them off. But yeah, those are the Avengers there. But yeah, Lesnar leads them because you want to talk no pulling punches, none of that, all weapon shots. I remember he wrestled Triple H and they introduced the steel steps into their match. They brought him into the ring, and I remember Triple H pedigreed Brock onto the steel steps. And most guys, they put their hands down to kind of block. When Triple H lets go of your hands, you put your hands down to, soften the blow a little bit. I don't even think Triple H let go of Brock's hands. I think Brock took that mouth and face first,
full on,
dead into the steps, and just said, hey, whatever happens, happens. My God, but.
But yeah, I think with that ringside environment, that's real cool. And then, we don't have this on the list, but this is an honorable mention. The arena itself, all the matches that go out into the arena.
Oh, yeah.
Jumping off the balconies. Hell, we've seen Sting at 64, 65 jump off a balcony recently.
He's done it, yeah.
So the arena itself, can be used as a weapon, but it never ceases to amaze me. The creativity that these guys and gals can pull off in the ring, it's just amazing with what they can do.
Yeah, definitely. You got to be creative in those kind of situations. You're out there, everybody's expecting pandemonium. It's going to go crazy. It's got to go wild. You got to be inventive. And, these guys are able to do it. They're able to use those weapons and make them memorable.
Yep. All right. So that was our talk about our most match-used weapons. Obviously, there are plenty more that we could go through, but we're not going to take all that time today to go through them. But hit us up on our social media platforms. Tell us what your favorite weapon that you've seen used in a match. If we've, if we've, not put one in the list that you thought should be there, hit us up, drop us a line. And with that, we thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast, and we bid you adieu.
Steel chair against the head.
Today's podcast was produced by SBP. You can find our podcast on all major podcast platforms. Also connect with us on our social media accounts. Search for The Bookers Alliance on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.